I'll remind everyone that they're watching Wrap, which is a show that's taking place live in the storefront window of the DKNY shop at 420 West Broadway in New York City. Over the course of these 8 weeks, I'm interviewing different female creatives who are working at the edge of their field in creativity, artistry, technology, and more. And our next and final guest for today is so awesome and is dancing in. Woo! Welcome,
hello.
Geena. Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Nice
Thank
to
you
meet
so
you.
much for being here. So we have little instructions. These are microphones. They should stay close to our mouth. That's
Okay,
about it.
microphone.
I think you're a pro at this.
Hi. World could hear us, right?
The
Yes.
world can hear us.
Can
So the
you guys
world
hear
can see
us?
us here,
Yes.
and that world can see us.
She could hear us.
She can definitely hear us.
Hello.
Except she has headphones in.
She has headphones.
Darn and darner. So, Geena, thank
Hi.
you so much for being here. I'm going to introduce you to the world now. They can hear us inside and out.
Yes.
So, for those of you who don't know, and I think that's probably very few of you, Geena Rocero was born and raised in Manila, Philippines, and is a model, producer, trans rights advocate, and co-host of the TV show Aspireist for the USA Network. On March 31st, 2014, in honor of International Transgender Day of Visibility, Rocero came out as a transgender at the annual TED Conference. Her talk has since been viewed almost 3 million times. Geena is the founder of Gender Proud, an advocacy and media production company that tells stories to elevate justice and equality for the transgender community. She, with Gender Proud Productions, produced and presented Beautiful as I Want to Be on Logo TV, highlighting trans youth, and received the 2016 GLAAD Media Award. Gender Proud also produced Willing and Able, a web series about transgender employment with Fusion, and most recently worked with Fusion/Univision to produce a TV documentary about transgender athletes, No League of Their Own. Geena has spoken at the White House, United Nations, and has been featured on E's I Am Kate, magazine cover of Candy Magazine, Vanity Fair, Transamerica, Marriott's #Love Travels campaign, and CoverGirl Cosmetics #Girls Can campaign. Most recently, she was on the cover of Harper's Bazaar, India. Geena has been featured in media publications such as CNN, Al Jazeera America, MSNBC, Today Show, NHK World Channel, HuffPost Live, New York Magazine. I mean,
And
this
here.
makes me, and here, and Wrap, DKNY's very own, and Emily Baltz's very own platform.
Here we
So,
are.
this is incredible. I am breathless even saying this, and I have a lot of appreciation for you being here. This show is, as you heard, 8 weeks here at 420 West Broadway. And the genesis of the show was to talk about women and talk about their recipes for art and process. And we're sitting on a subway platform because in many ways, I think these stories have been underground for a long time. And here's a way to create a platform and bring it above ground. And I think your story is one that embraces the holistic spectrum of all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious to know, and for those of us who don't know that, how you got here today.
Okay, wow. It's, growing up in the Philippines, I like what you said about underground and like the stories to uncover,
Yeah.
right? Because for the longest time, I could just quickly say that, growing up in the Philippines, it's a very different culture, right? And it's not the way that we have it here in the United States where, you're talking about underground, you're just trying to find your way through the world because there's really no blueprint on how to communicate your identity or how you identify. So even at such a young age, growing up in the Philippines, and Philippines is a very Catholic country. It's really intense Catholic. So if you're trans, like what happens, right? If you think about that, what happens for trans people? However, growing up in the Philippines, I've always expressed myself, and I've used whatever way I could communicate myself. I remember around 5 years old, I love wearing like t-shirt on my head or like blanket. Like I would put it in my head, or if I want like a, like sort of like a bigger, stuff in my head, I would wear like a big blanket. And it got to the point that my mom asked me, how come you always wear that t-shirt in your head or bath towel? And I said, Mom, this is my hair. I'm a girl.
Amazing.
So using a piece of fabric, a bath towel, as a form of, identifying as myself, as a form of, as liberation, as a form of, truly communicating through a fabric, a form of a piece of expression, right? I mean, that helps so much for me. And then growing up in the Philippines, I knew at such a young age that I'm a girl, even though the world is telling me that I'm a boy and be a boy because God made you a boy, or the world sees you as a boy. So even at such a young age, it's funny, I just kept on coming back underground because stories of trans people for the longest time has always been underground, right? Because nobody pays attention to it, or nobody sees it as something to be talked about in mainstream or part of mainstream, and I know it's changing. I know there's a lot of conversations that's happening around that, but I think the experiences, for me specifically, I could speak of, at such a young age, I really needed to find those ways to communicate my way of being, my femininity, or playing with Barbies. Or I think really the first times I got into fashion is because, I would play with my sister's Barbie or stole their Barbies, or just walk around the neighborhood and look for little. I go to like tailor shops and like ask for like remaining fabrics, and I would create halter tops for my Barbies, or created like a Barbie pageant, like, so such a young age, there's that expression of how I want to communicate myself.
Yeah, and that fashion serves that purpose, I think, in all of our daily lives. That's interesting that you were able to catch on to it so rampantly. And I'm also curious, I mean, in terms of the presentation of self, you came out 2 years ago in a very, very public way. So your TED Talk was a great reveal. And I think, 3 million of us have watched it since then, and I have great admiration for that. I'm curious on a personal level, what did it feel like? Because, here we are, even in a fishbowl of life, every day I sit here and I'm like, whoa! But just on an emotional level, what did that feel like to you, to be able to give that talk in front of so many people?
Wow, I look back, it's giving me goosebumps, just like remembering, because who comes out in a TED Talk, right? But I think the bigger picture, my friend Darnell Moore from Mike.com says something about, like, actually it's more like calling people in, when I made that decision to finally share my story. I think, there's so much that happened before that, because, I moved to New York City in 2005 to be a model. And it's important to talk about context, because at the time there's not an out transgender model the way that we have now. There's reality shows, being in the cover of magazines and all. It has changed, but at the time, moving to New York City, I didn't have sort of like that that vision of. I think the models who came out before me that were outed, their careers suffered, so I didn't want that to happen to me. So for 10 years I wasn't out as a trans person, so even to my model agent. So you could just imagine, I was working in fashion in a culture that is so visual. The way we communicate through visual imagery, and importance of culture, and how do we dictate culture through fashion, through all those advertising imagery. And I would do commercials and magazine covers, and I'm so visual, being presented that way, but the world actually does not see me as myself. So I think having that life and living that life, at a certain point, I've had enough. At a certain point, the internal shame that I was carrying, all of those things, it got to a point that, like, I've had enough. So, on my 30th birthday, it was sort of like a gift. It was like a gift for myself to finally just share that truth. So I think I got to the point that I was just ready, and there was a bigger purpose in why I wanted to do that. So, when I decided if I'm going to do that, I want to do it in a big way. It has to mean something if I'm going to risk something. So I did it on a TED Talk, and it's been just an amazing process. And just for the first time, standing there in front of like thousands of people, and I know that it's something going to be global, I freed myself just to say that I'm a proud transgender woman. It took a while to get there, and it has liberated me. It has allowed me to do more work. I think it says a lot, for me, on the things that I want to create as an artist, things that I want to produce. things that I couldn't do before because I'm not fully myself. So now that I am myself, I just want to do so many things. And there's projects that you think about. There's things I want to collaborate with people. You know, I want to travel the world, and so it's been an amazing journey. The
Yeah.
last 2 years.
Tell me, you have like a fan base that's
Hi.
parading down. If only all of you could see this.
Hello.
Now, that's, I mean, the journey that you've gone on is filled with risk. It's filled with courage. It's filled with also identity, right? And I think when we look forward at what it means to be an artist, I'm curious, in your words, what does that mean for you?
I mean, for me, it means, I mean, for me personally, I want to utilize the things that I know, my experience in life. You know, I remember the first time I moved to New York City, you know, I had no idea how do you be a model? There's no like models for dummies, you know, like this is how you get into a modeling agency, right? Yeah. There's no such thing. So I was just like trying to figure out as I go along. And I think the best way for me at the time was just really, okay, how do I get better pictures? How do I get, have more pictures in my book? So I was really hustling to be in front of like photographers to have a photo shoot with them and do a go-see and like develop myself and develop my book. So, for me, those things that I've used to hustle to get my pictures taken and to develop my book, develop myself as a model, to work with so many different people, like I've used that in the way I want to produce, whether it's a web series or a documentary, right? And then utilize those things of what my experience. For example, we have this project, called Beautiful as I Want to Be, literally asking trans youth, what is beautiful as I want to be? What does it mean for you? And, sometimes we work with trans youth that they've never been asked that question before.
Wow.
And to simply ask trans youth or anybody, like, what does it mean for you? And to let's use that in a way to communicate in a photo shoot, and like let's film that, like whatever that is. Like there's this amazing youth named Zim who wants to be an artist and a painter. So Zim started like painting, and we filmed that, and like it's just so liberating and freeing for them. Like this one kid wants to be the first trans president. Okay, let's film that. How are you going to be as a transgender president of the United States? What does it mean? And, we communicated, her being inside the boardroom and communicating, how she communicate with her constituents.
The next Veep.
Exactly, right? I mean, like, let's look forward to that. And so
just,
I think some of the stuff that I've experienced, when I first moved to New York and when I first explored being an artist, working with photographers, like I'm sharing that to the people that I'm working with, or the way, or the projects that I want to communicate. How I want to communicate is that I just want to give people that platform or agency for themselves to just simply asking what do you want, and whatever you say that you want, let's create a format around it and let's film it and create a web series around it or TV show around it. So it's been a fun process.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're asking questions. You're asking questions to the audience. You're asking questions to culture at large. Mm-hmm. What do you think what are the kind of the next stories that you want to see out in the world? Because these are what help shape our future.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of questions of like, how do we redefine, the things that we thought that we never thought about. Like, for example, beauty. Like, when you think of beauty, for the longest time, you don't think of, being in a campaign or being in a TV show, concepts where trans people of color are being part of that conversation, right? I mean, now it's being queer and being gender nonconforming and making sure that, for the longest time, this belief system is gender is just this binary way to look at things, and how not necessarily my goal, but I'm constantly asking that question, how do I better communicate, gender is not a binary, or how do we empower people to be themselves when it comes to the way they identify with gender, especially with kids. I mean, I say with kids because kids these days, like, they really don't identify. A lot of them don't identify, being male or female. So in the work that I do, how do I communicate that? How do I redefine that? How do I, uncover those things? It's for the longest time it's been underground and like give them that spotlight.
Yeah. And yet, I think I hear you say that, and yet we're still talking male and female, right? We still have very clear gender associations on our passports, on our driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And you associate with the gender of female.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
What does it mean for me? I mean, like, that's how I identify. But, I think the bigger conversation is when we talk about gender, what does that mean, right? We're not making sure, even like when we talk about, women's equality campaign or like the big, gender equality, like let's really sort of interrogate, like, what does it really mean? How do you create this inclusive process for people that, the people who doesn't identify in this binary system is beyond just that, right? For me, I identify as female. Do I express my gender always in this very binary female way? Definitely not. Like that's my identity. The way I express my gender is different. The way I express, the roles that's been for the longest time expected of me. So it's always interrogating gender. It's a spectrum of choice. Like make that choice in the way you want to communicate for yourself or the people that you're around with, or how you want to dress. It's really deconstruct that gender is fluid and it's a spectrum. How beautiful is that we actually, teach kids, at such a young age that, they have that choice, right?
Yeah.
Because and especially now these days, a conversation when people are saying, it's just this transgender thing. No, it involves everybody because everybody has gender, but define that for yourself and not making sure it's not just this limiting concept of gender. So
Yeah. I think it's a provocative idea in some ways because it still feels new.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious for people who are going through that spectrum of choice, who are questioning their identity, what can they do to feel supported, to feel strong in making that choice?
I mean, now more than ever, there's a lot of resources that's out there. I mean, like here in New York City, we have the LGBT Center. There's online communities like PFLAG for parents. It's important to find that resource. It is unfortunate, like in the reality, especially for young LGBT youth, the homeless population, 40% identify as LGBT. Because what happens is, usually their parents or their family members does not agree and they're getting kicked out of the house. So it's important to understand that, where is that coming from, but at the same time, know that there are resources that's out there and take your time,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you actually say you have a choice and make that choice to express your gender how you want to express, sometimes it's also intimidating, right? So take your time, reach out to people. If your blood family does not support you, it is a sad and unfortunate thing. Find that other family. Choose that other family. A family and environment that wants you to be a successful person that you are, because it's there. And sometimes you find it through different passions, whether it's sports or art or fashion or any different way how to redefine this notion of family, right, for people to be successful.
Yeah. Who is your support network? What does it look like in your world?
I've been so lucky. I was just talking about this last night, actually. I had a funny conversation. So growing up in the Philippines, we have this culture of transgender beauty pageants, which is this big irony. It's a very Catholic country, but transgender beauty pageants is like so mainstream. Like it's as mainstream as you could imagine. There would be pageants right down the street in like almost every other week, because we celebrate it during religious celebrations. So you could just imagine the big irony of my life at such a young age. So like, okay, this is how I'm gonna deal with. So growing up, that was the images of the. I guess my point of reference at that time, even when I was young, is that maybe I could be one of those women joining those transgender beauty pageants. So when I was 15 years old, I was watching one of these pageants, and a woman named Tiger Lily. Yes,
Beautiful name.
sprinkles of magics and love and unicorn woman,
Yeah.
She came up to me and she said, "Why don't you join this pageant? Yeah, I think you have a potential." So, as a young trans girl being asked to join that pageant, you say yes to that, right?
Yeah.
So I joined that pageant and I won, at 15 years old. And all of a sudden, I found this family of people who are joining pageants, people that are like the hair and makeup artists. I have all of a sudden a community of people that is part of that world that growing up, I was just looking up to them. All of a sudden, I'm part of their world. So they became my support system. At 15 years old, I guess I could technically say that being a transgender beauty queen is my first job.
Incredible.
It's not a bad first job, right? So traveled around Philippines, wearing costumes or, being on stages and making money, and so I could buy hormones and all of those things. They became my chosen family, besides my amazing family, right? So, that was my first support system that just want me to be successful, to have given me love and support. I, found some of my best girlfriends in that world. So I was really lucky to have had and found that community. Certainly it was different when I had to move to United States. I miss them. I'm still in touch with them. I'm always with them. I'm always, talking with them on Facebook. And it's one of my favorite things is that I know that every time I go back to the Philippines, they're there for me and they love me and I love them, and it's still the same. Just like I'm just a young 15-year-old trans beauty queen girl. So it's sweet.
It's so sweet. And I'm curious to know, what would your inner child say now, looking at you?
I think I've had so many internal conversations when I was young, because I think, knowing at such a young age that I am different, I identify differently the way the world sees me as. I knew at a young age that I express myself in such a, very effeminate, but the world sees me differently. That truth that I was seeing at such a young age, it's good that I listened to it. It's good that I never gave up on those internal conversations and me thinking that maybe I should do this, maybe I should follow that path, because as long as I followed that truth, it led me to the things that I am, passionate about. It led me to work with people that I'm interested in, or places and communities that allowed me to see the world and to see people's experiences, to ask those questions. So, I'm grateful that I listened to it. I am just sometimes, I travel a lot. So sometimes when I'm on the plane and, looking above the clouds, and I think of myself like, I was just that young trans girl who dreamed of being the woman that I am now. Like, this is the dream. I'm living the dream. And obviously there's more dreams to be had, but just that sense of gratitude and love that I get to be the woman that I am right now at this moment here, sitting with you and looking back at this moment. It brings you in such a present state of being and appreciation of wonder and awe, that like, listen to that, follow that internal conversations with yourself of what you want to do, what you're passionate about.
Yeah. I can think of no better suggestion for all humanity. It's a wonderful moment to be able to connect to that.
Yeah.
I think to your essence as a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, and people actually relate with this so many times, and I've been quoted by this in so many different ways. I think one of the first things that I said on my TED Talk was, the world, makes you as a person that you are not, but inside who you are.
Yeah.
And there's a big space between that, right? Because we're constantly being told who we're supposed to be, how we should be, how we should act, whether it's to our family affiliation, religious affiliation, economic standing. Like, all of those things intersect in the way we live and express ourselves in the world, right? But listening into that conversation with yourself, listening into that internal, that internal compass of your truth, and find ways to get there, whether it's yoga, meditation, travel, or doing art, anything that you could find as long as you're, listening to that core, I think that could be a good start for the world.
Yeah. And I think you've listened very well. And I'm curious, when you're listening now, what do you hear about Geena in 10 years and 20 years?
I want to travel the world. I think if I'm listening to Geena, I want to think that I have gotten to those places that I wanted to see, and countries that I wanted to see, or communities that I wanted to see. I think there's a little anthropologist in me, that wanted
a good one you would be.
and just travel and see the world. So I want to listen to that. Like in the next few days, I'm going to Sydney. I've never been to Sydney. It's my first time going there. I'm going there for work, but I also made the most of other things I could do in Sydney. I want to, there's a couple of projects I'm working on that would allow me to sort of research and investigate, So I feel, when we talk about listening to that, I want to listen. I want to travel. I want to see so many communities. I want to redefine the way I've understood history and culture and societies, and redefining my understanding of it. I just want to be curious. I just want to be forever curious about the world around me, and whatever that's how I want to communicate that, whether it's through the arts or visual arts or doing a show. It's those things that I want to continue doing.
Yeah, I think you embody it so well. You've continued expanding our definition of so much.
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
I feel like I should sing something epic. Unfortunately, I can't. But I do have something to offer you, because the show is RAP, Women, Recipes, Art and Process. That's what it stands for. And I make a wrap for everyone.
You do?
Who's on the show.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have to lean over.
Okay.
It's kind of way over here. Hold on a second.
Thank you.
What we thought about making for you is that here is this sort of, I think, sweet and salty wrap, like lunch and breakfast.
Okay.
So it pushes the boundary of the time, the place, and the flavor of what wrap can be.
Like that. I like that I could be both. We have to make sure that it's not just sometimes just salty and sweet. It could be in between too, right? So we're not just this binary things.
This is the wrap spectrum, to use your word.
The wrap spectrum.
Yeah.
I love that.
Also filled with things that are, delicious for you. Almond butter, banana, blistered grapes, which are an amazing thing to give. Rosemary and cinnamon. So it has a little bit of a global flavor, and might be also a good travel pack for these next coming years for you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
And more than anything, as a gift to you, thank you for sharing your story and this time together.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed this so much.
Yeah. Geena, you've busted the definitions of all. And I'm excited about this future. You're making content, you're making art. It's, I think, one of the great voices in the world to be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And thank you to everyone watching. This is Wrap, an 8-week-long show in the storefront window of the DKNY shop at 420 West Broadway. My name is Emily Baltz. I'm your host, and I've just finished talking with the awesome Geena Rocero. And we will be back next Thursday at 1 p.m. live at facebook.com/DKNY. Thank you.
Thank you.